This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 32, the special bumper election edition of Here's How. You get nothing for ages, then along come three politicians all on the same day. In this show I have candidates from Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, all defending their party's record and explaining why you should vote for them on Friday.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
If you listened to the last show, you'll know that I had interviewed candidates from all the smaller parties, but I said that after many efforts, I hadn't managed to get any candidate from Fine Gael, Labour, Fianna Fáil or Sinn Féin to agree to an interview. Almost as soon as that podcast went online, several candidates got back to me and were able to do interviews at short notice. I want to thank John Brassil of Fianna Fáil, Seán Kyne of Fine Gael and Cllr Sorcha Nic Cormaic of Sinn Féin. All of them did interviews at short notice, as I said. They all took hard questioning about their party's record and plans, and I think they all answered well. I'll leave you to judge that. And that leaves the Labour Party. I know that it's election time. I know that they're busy. They might not be quite so busy next week, but I want to make it clear that I contacted every office that I could find for the Labour Party in Leinster House and outside it. I contacted every single one of their candidates. A couple sent their apologies, but the great majority didn't reply. I'll leave you to judge that too. And my thoughts on the election? I think that we're stuck in the middle of a process of change. There have been a lot of false dawns in Ireland. Mostly progress inches forward in our country. Every time that we seem to be about to take a big step forward, we bottle it and go back to our old ways of glacial change. That happened after the election of Mary Robinson, after the first Fianna Fáil Labour coalition in 1992. You could even say it happened after the first inter-party government in 1948. I don't think this election will be a leap forward. Might even be a retrenchment if we get a Fine Gael Fianna Fáil coalition. But I do think that the steps are getting bigger. Taken together, the last election, this one and I think the next one will be seen by history to be at least a quickening in the pace of change.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
I'm joined on the line now by Sorcha Nic Cormaic. She is the Sinn Féin councillor for Dundrum on Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council. I think you've been running in every election for about the past decade, but you were finally got in 2014. Is that right, Sorcha?
That's correct. The first time I ran was in 2004 in a local election and narrowly missed a seat there. But yes, so that would make it 10 years before I finally made a breakthrough. But we were tipping away at it for a long time. And I suppose in an area like Dundrum, people didn't really think that they would elect a Sinn Féin councillor. So we kind of rocked the establishment a bit there back in 2014 when I topped the poll, and certainly gave them all a run for their money. So,
and now you're going for the Dáil. Does Sinn Féin want to get into government in this election?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in terms of Sinn Féin in government, it's a question of if rather than when, I think. When rather than if. It may not be this go out, but we're certainly in it to win it this time. Because we've signed up to the Right to Change Charter, this is a movement that grew up out of the massive Right to Water protests across the country, especially the big one in Dublin. But there are 106 candidates running under the Right to Change banner. So Sinn Féin would be by far the biggest grouping in that section, but there are other candidates from People Before Profit and Independence for Change, and Direct Democracy as well. So there's 106 candidates running in that banner. So there is actually this time around a very realistic possibility that Sinn Féin could form a government. And as I said, we would be the biggest grouping in that Right to Change banner. So we're not interested in going into government with anybody where we'd be the minority party in government, where we would have to break our election promises and not be able to fulfil, on our desires. But if we were to go through under this banner and get into government, we would be able to deliver on all of our red line issues. So
sure. I want to have a look at some of the things that you're promoting. One of the things in your manifesto is you're saying that you want to cap public sector pay at what you call realistic rates. What's that in actual numbers?
Well, now, I wouldn't be able to give you the figures on that. I do know I have the manifesto in my hand now, but we've had to go to the Department of Finance to cost all of these measures and things that we want to do. So just because I don't have the figure at the top of my head doesn't mean that Sinn Féin don't have it. It's gone into our manifesto and it's been costed. So in order to reduce public sector pay and pensions of the highest earners in the public sector, this will save us €15.25 million. So, I have that figure to hand, but obviously somewhere there it is. But look, we're only talking about the highest earners, and I don't think it's any secret that some of the top earners in the public sector are getting far too much money. It's not sustainable.
How would you propose to attract top level consultants to the health service if they're going to have their salary capped?
Well, I do know that we have made we've made a sort of a, what do you call a loophole? Not a loophole. Yes, an exception for the consultants in the health service, and it's exactly because of the reasons you outlined. Unfortunately, there had been a problem with attracting consultants, so we have made an exception there exactly for the reasons you've outlined, to make sure that we do attract them and that we can get them in, because obviously we need them. But across the other sections, the highest earners, there's loads of people. The vast majority of public sector workers are low to middle income earners. We're only talking about the small minority that are right at the top that are earning vast amounts of money, and it's not sustainable in this economy when everybody is suffering. The austerity measures foisted upon us. It's just not fair, and it's not right.
Well, let's have a look at a couple of other of your policies. One quotation I have here, it says, Sinn Féin does support private enterprise as being essential to the economy, but we recognise the hugely important part the state has to play in economic success. There should be a state bank, a state insurance company, a state fuel company, a state IT company for telephone and broadband. That sounds a little bit like North Korea. Are we going to be going back to the days of the Department of Post and Telegraphs when it took 7 years to get a telephone?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that's what we're envisaging.
But a state fuel company? Are you serious?
A state fuel company? Well, I don't see why not. I mean, these would be resources that should belong to the people. They've done it in places like Norway to great effect, and I don't see why we should do it here.
Will I have to send off a form in triplicate in order to get my home heating oil delivered?
See, I suppose, this is your perception of it, and you think that a public-run company cannot operate in the way a privately run company can because of the bureaucracy. But there's no reason. It just has to be managed properly, resourced properly and funded properly. There's no reason that it can't. And that way, the profits can remain in Irish ownership, in the ownership of the people of Ireland. So I don't accept it as an argument just because it hasn't been done right in the past, that it can't be done. I just feel that we just have to think about it, have a bit of a better vision, and manage and fund things and resource things properly.
Yeah, but hang on a second. When public sector workers in the past weren't getting the pay that they wanted, they just started knocking on their TD's door, and their TD would overrule the management, and that led to disastrously bad service and very high prices. What would stop somebody working for the state fuel company saying that we don't want to be driving around when it's cold, or we want shorter hours, we want to be paid more than other people with comparable jobs, and we won't vote for you if you don't overrule management and give it to us?
Yeah, well, I mean, you raise an interesting scenario there, but again, there's nothing stopping people from doing that if they're working in private companies. They can go on strike.
Yeah, there is, because they'll get fired.
Yeah, but then...
TD can't stop them from getting fired if they work in a private company.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I just think, look, if people were paid properly and people had a decent share in the finances, I suppose I just have a different vision to yourself. I'd like to see the sort of more equitable scenario where the wealth is distributed a little bit more evenly across all the sections, and that's the same in business, okay? So obviously the business owners can make their profits, but it should be distributed fairly amongst the people who are making the money for them in terms of their staff. And I do think that if staff are happy, that you can avoid a lot of the confrontations and a lot of the things where they're not going to be looking for better rights and better pay if they're satisfied with the pay and the rights and the working conditions that they have. So it's important to make sure that they do. Obviously, if they're looking for more...
Hang on a second. How do you think somebody who worked in Google or in Facebook, who work very, very hard, admittedly for quite good wages, but how do you think some of them would feel if they were told they had to pay more or have lesser services in order to subsidise people working in those new nationalised companies?
Yeah, no, I don't know really, to be honest. I mean, we're bringing all these sort of hypothetical scenarios into play. I don't think I'm going to be able to give you a satisfying answer, really, to be honest.
That's fair enough, but you understand that it's an issue, that's a question that a voter would ask.
I take on board your point, definitely, yeah. But like I say, we could go into all these hypothetical scenarios. I can't really give you a satisfactory answer, but I take on board your point. But I still don't think it's an argument against it, but, maybe other people think
differently. Give me in that case, Sarah, and I know that you're not, you're a councillor, which is part-time, you're not, other parties have put up people who are full-time salaried politicians, and so you might be at a slight disadvantage in that, and I don't want to kind of beat you up based on that basis.
Yeah. You said you'd start off with some easy questions. I'm still waiting on them. Go on.
Tell me, for you, what is the most important policy area personally?
I suppose working on the council for the last year and a half, and considering the crisis in the country at the moment in housing, I think that's the area that's going to need the most investment and the most work for whoever gets into government, and also for all those people remaining on the councils as well. It's a massive issue, and I think it's got to be the biggest issue.
How does it manifest itself in your constituency?
Oh, sure, there are thousands of people. There's more than 5,000 people on the housing list in Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council. It's growing every day. There are people 12, 13, 14 years on the housing list. There has been a move away in the last few years of actually social housing builds. And what has happened are families that are... stopped. It has effectively stopped. And what has happened is, and there's vast amounts of money been spent, and in my view been absolutely wasted, paying rents for people in private accommodation. And effectively all you're doing with that social housing fund is paying off landlords' mortgages. On top of that, the people living in those situations, getting rent allowance or HAP or whatever it is, don't have really much security. And I've spoken to families that have moved house 3 times in the last couple of years. In particular, I'm thinking of a woman, a single parent with 2 young children, and I can't even imagine what that must be like for somebody. So people, I believe that money is being wasted. I think it should be invested, and I think that Sinn Féin have that in their manifesto about investing in building houses across the state. And it will require massive investment, but a move away from this. What they've done effectively is privatise social housing, and I just really don't agree with it. I suppose as well, there are a lot of issues, burning issues at the moment, but if you tackle the housing crisis, if we were to build 100,000 houses across the state in the next 6 or 7 years, that would also have, this is where the joined up thinking comes in, have a knock-on effect in terms of your unemployment crises, because who's going to build all those houses? You're going to be getting your chippies and your brickies and your electricians and your plumbers back into gainful employment. So,
Sarah, I think you're correct. I think you're correct. I think that housing is very important, and that it's crazy to be paying the amount of rent supplement, which is effectively just enriching landlords. But Sinn Féin is promoting itself as a party of the underdog, that you'll stand up to vested interests. And I really kind of want to know how far you'd be willing to go on that, because the one problem that is causing our housing crisis is the lack of building land, which is being hoarded by people who know that they will make millions, if not billions, by sitting on most of it, squatting on it, and only letting out the most constricted supply. And what we need in this country is a tax on vacant sites that would make it more expensive to hold people to ransom than it would be to actually to sell up. Would Sinn Féin do that, particularly given that you're very strongly a rural party and that farmers who are looking at big windfalls from rezoning might not like it?
They might not like it, but I think you're right. We've looked at introducing a vacant site levy. The government proposed completely abolishing the windfall tax, which, as you know, is paid on profits
from land. It was brought in by Fianna Fáil and the Green Party on rezoning profits.
Yeah. Now, we don't agree with its abolition, but we'd like to see it operational at a rate akin to the marginal income tax rate of 40%.
Well, it's 33% now. So somebody making a windfall out of rezoning pays less tax on that than a McDonald's worker working an hour's overtime.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the other thing is, the local authorities at the moment in Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council have said, because we've been recently putting through our county development plan and we've looked at some of the zoning issues, land isn't an issue here at the moment. We've got land owned by the council, zoned for development. So, there is land there. We could start this tomorrow if we could get the political will to do it. And I'm sure that it's similar across the state. But yes, you've mentioned how people are hoarding land. Where it's needed, I think we need to free it up, and you need to have some good imaginative ways of thinking to try and get that where it's needed, to get those lands freed up for development. But
okay, I appreciate that. I think we've got that point. On Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council, I understand you're on the Special Policy Committee for Environment, Climate Change and Energy. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Okay, and I've got here the EPA report, the Environmental Protection Agency report, runs 2009 to 2012, and they talk about, particularly in border counties and particularly in County Louth, hundreds of tons of sulfuric acid, contaminated absorbent and bleaching sludge that's been used for washing diesel. It's blindingly obvious, isn't it, Sorcha, that particularly in your party leader's constituency, there's a massive problem with organised crime and fuel smuggling and fuel washing.
Yeah, well, obviously it's not anywhere near our area. I actually haven't read that report. I should have, but I wouldn't know the first thing about
nevertheless, I'm sure you'd accept, and they list out, and I can put it on the page for this podcast if you want, the millions that border counties have to pay in cleaning up this contaminated waste. That organised crime is, I think, fairly obviously not necessarily being done by the remnants of the provisional IRA, but it is being done by people who were in the IRA, and it is being organised along the same command lines. And
well, I think we had
just one second. We had Tomás Slab Murphy, as he's called, someone who has millions of euros with no explanation about it, who has had hundreds of thousands of euros in bags, in hay sheds, in cash on his farm. He's been recently convicted in the Special Criminal Court of failing to pay tax on his mysterious income. And senior people in your party can't get enough of saying how he's a good Republican. Now, he's not a member of Sinn Féin. What they mean is he's a good member of the IRA. He's not.
Well, I'm not
he's
sure.
a criminal.
I just challenged that, but I know that it's been said ad nauseum that Jerry Adams said he was a good Republican. I'm sure it was in the context.
Martin McGuinness did.
Right, okay. Well, I don't know. I only know myself what I read in the paper. Look, Thomas Slab Murphy needs to be accountable, needs to, he's up before the courts. I know we have our issue with the Special Criminal Court. I don't know why the normal courts couldn't deal with it, but anyway, that's a different.
Well, let me suggest why. Because
but these people
the prosecutor is afraid that he will murder or threaten to murder members of the jury.
Okay, but look, he needs to be taken to task over it. Anybody
No, he doesn't.
Else
he needs to go to jail.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Look, if he's guilty of that, then he needs to be taken to task over that. And whatever the jail sentence, whatever that is, I have no problem with that.
But do you understand, Sorcha, when senior members of your party, extremely, top table people in your party, can't get enough of praising him, of saying how vital he was to the peace process? I presume that means how vital it was that he stopped murdering people.
Yeah. Well, I don't see it as they can't get enough of praising him. It's a comment because it's all they know of him. In my view, I can't really comment for them. I don't know the first thing about it, so it's not something that I'd ever be saying about him. I only know what I'm reading in the paper. If I knew him and I said in a radio interview, geez, I don't know anything about all of that stuff, they're coming out with the statements of fact of what they know. That's fine. I've no problem with that. But I do think that if he's guilty and if he can't account for that money, he needs to be dealt with the same way anybody else would be. And the same for what you said about the illegal criminal gang activity. We need to fund and resource the Gardaí so that they can deal with those people in the proper way. If the EPA, and again, I don't really know the facts about this, but if the EPA can prove that this kind of stuff is going on, well then the Gardaí need to be resourced, they need to be able to get in there and be able to put a stop to it and be able to charge and convict and do whatever needs to be done so that justice is served. I'm not going to...
Your party deputy leader, Mary Lou MacDonald, said that when Gerry Adams says he's not a member of the IRA, she said that she believes him. Do you?
Yeah, well, you see, I've never known anybody who was a member of the IRA.
No, but Gerry Adams says that he was never a member of the IRA. That leaves the whole of his CV for the 1970s, apart from 2 years when he was in prison. His whole CV for the 1970s is basically blank. Do you think that's credible?
It's no skin off my nose. I'm going to accept it because he said it. I've no reason and I've no evidence to the contrary. And if anybody else came up to me and said any different, well, if they have any evidence, that's fine. But I've no actual evidence to the contrary. I joined the party in 2001. It was long after the IRA had left the stage. It's not really an issue for me whether he was or he wasn't, whether he says he was or whether he says he wasn't. It's not an issue for me.
I know what you're asking. You're correct. It's not an issue for you. I accept that. But do you understand that, and I've seen in audiences Mary Lou MacDonald laughed at when she says that. Do you accept that undermines your credibility?
Not really. I mean, I know it does seem to be a bit of an obsession with some people, but normally it's people who are either our political opponents, people who don't respect our policies, are never going to vote for us anyway, and they have this obsession with us. It's, are they going around asking everybody else? No. It's this thing with Gerry Adams, and to be honest, I think people are getting a bit tired of it. I can only say I accept it. I've no reason not to. I don't care whether he was or not, but if he comes out and says it wasn't, then that's all I have to go on. I'm not going to sit here going, no, that can't be true, that can't be credible, because what would motivate me to do it? Nothing, Now,
okay.
Having said that, but just finish that.
Sure.
I'm not motivated to do anything. However, he has many, many political opponents, many of them, who would be highly motivated to get him into any kind of trouble they could. And if they had any shred of evidence or anything to the contrary, why wouldn't they go to the guards, or why wouldn't they go to the PSNI, or why wouldn't they go and get him done in whatever way they could? Because I'm not motivated to do it. I think it would be petty. It's nothing to me. But he's loads of political opponents who would jump at the chance, if they could, to get him into trouble over it. Why aren't they doing it? Why hasn't he been You know, that's what I don't understand.
I'll leave that as a rhetorical question. You mentioned earlier that you were part of the Right to Change movement in Sinn Féin. That includes People Before Profit, the Anti-Austerity Alliance, and so forth.
Well, actually, it doesn't include Anti-Austerity Alliance.
Oh, excuse me. It does include People Before Profit, though, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
And
they've said very clearly that there isn't a cat's chance in hell that they will go into coalition with either Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael or Labour. Would you?
No, not unless they signed up to the Right to Change, which they're not going to. And also, we're not going into government as the minority party, full stop, no matter what, with anybody. Our membership decides our party policy at our Ardèche, not the leadership. It's a bottom-up the way we work. And our membership have already said it. We will have an Ardèche in March. Nothing's going to change on that front. We will not be going into government with those parties. If Fianna Gael were to turn around tomorrow and say, oh, listen, we're going to go from being completely right-wing to being socialist, and we love the ideas, and we're going to sign up to the Right to Change Charter, you know, obviously they're not going to do it. It's a ridiculous proposition. But if they were to do it, then we'd have no problem with them. But they're not going to do that. And so we can stand over that. We can categorically state 100% no, that's not happening.
Okay. Do you accept then, Sorcha, that overwhelmingly likely the next government will be a Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael coalition, the most right-wing government we've ever had?
I think it's one of the likely possibilities. I don't know if you can hear there's a screaming baby in the background. I'm going to have to cut this short soon. But I do think that's probably a very likely possibility. I'd say if it happens, there'll be a few from either side having to jump ship because they won't be a part of it. But
my point for you is that a product of you choosing not to go into government is that we will have the most right-wing government that the state has ever had.
Yeah, but sure, how could we, we'd still be a very strong opposition, I suppose, but how could we affect any change? Look, Labour went into government, Labour used to be left-wing, Labour used to be the party of the workers, they went into government with a right-wing government in order to give it some balance. They did not give it any balance. They had to break every single election promise they made before the government. So they can't affect any change. So why would we do it? Why would we go up and prop up a right-wing government if we couldn't affect any of the things that we wanted to do? We're not going to go and make all these election promises and then turn around and say, well, there's nothing we could do because we didn't have the numbers, but we let them ride roughshod over the whole thing, do you know?
Sorcha, I can hear that you're going to have to go soon, so I'm going to ask you one very brief question. If you were to say to the voters of Dublin Rathdown in one sentence why they should vote for you in one sentence, what would that be?
Well, I'm the only left-wing candidate in the constituency running. I'm the only one that's going to, if our party get in, to abolish water charges and the local property tax. We've got a vision to tackle the housing crisis, reduce the cost of childcare, and so, you know, secure services for our community. And as the only left-wing candidate, I think, you know, a lot of people will feel that I'm the only choice for them.
Sorcha Nic Cormaic, Sinn Féin councillor for Dundrum and general election candidate in Dublin Rathdown. Thank you very much for talking to me.
No worries. Thank you. Bye.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Record a contribution to be included in the next show. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Seán Kyne is the Fine Gael TD in Galway West, and I've got him on the line now. Seán, why are you running in this election?
Well, I started first in politics in 2004. I was elected to Galway County Council, elected to Dáil Éireann in 2011, and I'm running to continue the work that I'm doing, to continue to work to get this government re-elected, this government which has put the country back on track through the decisions we've made and through the hard work of the Irish people, to continue to be part of a government that can lay out a long-term economic strategy to create more and better jobs, to make work pay and to invest in public services. And I'm asking people to vote for Fine Gael and Labour at this forthcoming election.
You came into government, you personally came into the Dáil at a very difficult time, and there's no question that you didn't have it easy at the time that you were coming in. Do you think maybe that though you made some mistakes, I'm thinking particularly about standing up to the ECB and the promissory note in the way that Ireland had been essentially bullied into bailing out banks that Ireland had no need to bail out.
Well, I think within the first few days of coming into government, when the Taoiseach met with Sarkozy and Merkel, they were putting pressure on him to change Ireland's corporation tax rate, for example, which the government has stated time and time again since that and before that would be sacrosanct, because it's so important for foreign direct investment to this country and the knock-on effect it has in terms of small and medium enterprises. I think we've been able to renegotiate the deal that the last government agreed with the Troika. We've been able to put an extra year with that plan to reduce the level of burden on the Irish people. We've been able to renegotiate the promissory note deal, which has pushed out into the future repayment of debts, and which will be reduced over time as with inflation and growth of the economy. We've been able to renegotiate the interest rates on the loans, and that was done in the first number of months of government. So I think we have been able to stand up as best we can to the Troika. Everything that could be done was asked for, and the deals that were achieved obviously will help reduce the burden on future generations, on Irish taxpayers.
It's notable, and it's certainly true that Ireland came under a lot of pressure, and the government resisted it to cut the corporation tax to 12.5%, which is seen as very important to attracting investment in Ireland. Michael Noonan, very shortly after you came into power, said to the Dáil, he said that he had not been threatened by Taoiseach over burning the bondholders. That doesn't exactly tally with his evidence to the banking inquiry, does it?
Well, look, at the banking inquiry has taken place and has reported, and the minister's evidence to that is on record. Obviously,
but the truth is, you were threatened. They said they'd basically, if you burnt the bondholders, they'd burn down the house.
That is what's been reported, yes, and obviously there was a lot of high stakes in relation to all of this. But as I said, we did achieve a number of things to reduce the burden on taxpayers. And, the most important thing now is that we've been able to reduce the deficit, which is nothing really to do with the banks or the debt in relation to the day-to-day spending to get this country back on track.
Sure. We're not spending so much more than the taxes we take in as previously. And I accept that not everything can be achieved, but do you accept that it is notable that when it came to protecting corporations, the Apples and the Googles, the government stood up to Europe? When it came to protecting the ordinary taxpayer having to bail out people like Shawnee Fitzpatrick and Anglo-Irish Bank, that's where they rolled over?
No, I wouldn't think they're rolled over. I wouldn't agree with that at all. I mean, every effort was put in place to try and ensure and enact savings to the deals that had been done previously. Obviously, the situation with Anglo-Irish has resulted in a debt and loss of money. AIB, to a lesser extent, because we're confident we'll get all that was invested in AIB back when we sell it, and that that money will come back into the exchequer.
Sure, but AIB was
AIB
was systemically important. Anglo-Irish Bank for sure wasn't.
It wasn't, but that deal had been done previously. I mean, obviously, AIB is in state ownership, and we'll be hoping to sell a portion of that, 25% of that, when as the markets continue to rise, and as the value of that will continue to rise, and that will be used to reduce the debt burden on this country to repay the loans that were taken out to save AIB. But certainly there is a legacy there from the last government. As I said, we have made the decisions to turn the country around, and we're in a better place now. And the aim now is to continue with the growth, to continue with job creation, to continue with, obviously every new job that's created saves social welfare payments. It increases the level of tax that is being paid, which we can put back into public services, put back into frontline staff, put back into reducing the burden on the ordinary people.
And you talk about the legacy that you received from the previous government. You got an enormous vote and had an enormous majority in the Dáil, based on people wanting a change. They wanted not to have the Fianna Fáil government anymore. Do you think that you were different enough? I'm thinking particularly about things like rezoning, things like the sort of low-level Garda corruption that we see with the penalty points. Do you think that Fine Gael was sufficiently different?
Well, certainly there's been challenges and challenges that have come up in various government departments. We have, effectively banned, for example, corporate donations. We have established the Constitutional Convention and held 8 referendums, including one to abolish the Shannons, which the people didn't back, but still it was a commitment to a promise made at the last election. We, ended unvouched expenses, cut allowances, significantly cut salaries of TDs and ministers, strengthened or expanded the remit of the Freedom of Information Act.
One other thing
to protect whistleblowers, lobbying legislation to increase openness and transparency. There's a lot of things that we did that people forget about, and they think about the ones that have hit the headlines in relation to the ones that you've mentioned earlier.
Sure. One other thing, and you mentioned a lot of things that are in the thrust of openness and transparency and essentially cleaning up government and cleaning up public administration. One thing that you also did was Fianna Fáil had brought in an 80% windfall tax on the benefits from rezoning, essentially because somebody who has their land rezoned hasn't done anything. They haven't. It's not a result of their talent or hard work, and their land rezoned. There's no reason why that money, or at least the bulk of it, should go to a landowner. The uplift really belongs to the state. 2 things happened on that. One was the Fine Gael-led government essentially abolished that, reduced the capital gains tax from 80% to 33%, which creates an enormous incentive for zoning corruption. And another thing they did was Phil Hogan, when he was the Environment Minister, cancelled inquiries into planning corruption in his own county, in Monaghan, where your party colleague Hugh McIlvanney was involved in wide-scale rezoning. Was that really appropriate?
Well, the 80% looks good on paper, and it was, I'm sure, populist at the time when there was a crash, and there was a crash due to,
maybe not so popular with rich farmers who support Fine Gael.
No, the issue is how much money was actually raised from that tax, and I don't think there was anything.
Its purpose isn't to take in tax. Its purpose is to deter corruption.
To deter corruption, I mean, we have a housing shortage now, therefore we need zone land, we need zone service land, we need to be able to build houses. I mean, how do you build houses if you don't have zone land, if you don't service it, if you don't have people willing to sell it? I mean, unless we have a communist country whereby the state takes over all the land resources, but we have a capitalist country, and I think the majority of people in this country want to maintain a capitalist country, want to maintain a fair country, but capitalist nonetheless. Property rights are protected in our constitution, so therefore if you want to build houses you need land, and it's a question of having land in the right location.
30 years ago or more, the Kenny report, which was written by a constitutional lawyer, said that the method it should be done to avoid corruption would be for the state to compulsorily purchase land at a premium above farming prices, but not at housing prices, to rezone it, and that the benefit that comes from the state, the rezoning, should stay with the state in the main.
Well, again, that is an option. I know there's a compulsory purchase enacted by the IDA in relation to lands in Kildare that was thrown out by the Supreme Court. That is one philosophy that you could do, but I mean, as I said, property rights are sacrosanct in the Constitution. I don't think it will be something that could be changed.
The Kenny report was written by a constitutional lawyer.
I don't think it will be popular with the electorate to interfere with property rights. I think it would seem to be very much going down a sort of a communist route. We need to ensure that we have an adequate supply of housing. We need to ensure that we have an adequate supply of land that's suitable to be built on in the environs of our towns and cities. I think we need to look at whether we need to start going up in terms of higher, taller buildings in our city centres rather than sprawling out.
Not too many of them in Connemara, no.
Not in Connemara, no. In Connemara, we have a preponderance of one-off rural housing, which again is what the people want. There's a tradition there, and for local communities to sustain local communities. But I mean, if you look at Galway City, if you look at Limerick, Cork, and Dublin, I think we need to start making better use of inner city lands and possibly looking to expand upwards.
But Seán, you mentioned the principles, for example, protecting private property. But we had in the recent past a party colleague of yours caught on camera demanding loads of money to support rezoning. That's the result of the landowners being able to essentially keep the entire benefit of the rezoning that a county council will make. It's just inevitable that those millions will turn back round in a circle to influence the decisions, isn't it?
Well, I certainly don't condone the actions of that individual or any of the other individuals of the other parties or independents who were involved in such activities. The benefits, first of all, they don't receive all the benefits because there is a tax. There's a capital gains tax, which is a law, which is a tax from the revenue.
Yeah, but somebody who worked an hour of overtime at McDonald's would pay a higher rate of tax.
I don't think so, and we've tried to reduce the level of tax on the ordinary worker. We've taken 700,000 people out of the USC. We're trying to cut taxes for those on low pay. We've increased the minimum wage. We've reversed Fianna Fáil's cut of the minimum wage and increased it again. And there's a lot of very positive legislation in relation to workers' rights which have been enacted. But at the end of the day, we have a housing shortage at the moment, and the state is investing in our local authorities to provide that housing in improved housing bodies, and we also need the private market to get involved. We need builders. Now, developers were a dirty word a number of years ago, but we need developers. We need people who can go out there to build houses for first-time buyers, for the rental market, for everyone else who wants to downsize or upsize or whatever. There needs to be a role, and also we need to create more jobs within the construction sector. Now, we don't need to go back, and no one wants to go back to where we were, but we need a more sustainable level of housing, a sustainable level of construction, and a sustainable housing policy, and that's certainly what I think we need.
Well, we don't want to go back in several other areas as well. You'd accept that I think the standard euphemism is very serious management difficulties, which I think everybody knows means corruption. There's serious problems in the Garda Síochána, isn't there? We've examined and set up tribunals or inquiries, I should say, into a number of matters. There was a number of them. I can't remember them all. There was certainly 3 or 4 inquiries in relation to the various issues that arose with Garda Síochána, in relation to GSOC, in relation to whistleblowers, in relation to that. But certainly we need a police force that the population can trust, and we also need to resource the police force. But one thing about that, the new commissioner that was appointed by your government was the woman who sat smiling and nodding when the then Garda Commissioner Callanan said that the actions of whistleblowers, people who many people regard as heroes trying to out corruption in the Gardaí, she sat smiling and nodding as the Garda Commissioner called their actions disgusting.
Yeah, she was Assistant Commissioner at the time.
And she sat beside him as he said that.
Nobody
who doesn't stand up and say that that's unacceptable is fit to be in a senior position in the Garda Síochána, are they?
I'm not sure what she may have said in private afterwards, or whether she disagreed or agreed or disagreed with the commissioner at the time. Yes, she didn't say anything on that day. That's not to say, and it's a question to her views on that issue afterwards.
But fundamental reform is needed, and Fine Gael essentially did the Fianna Fáil thing. They appointed the number 2. So you have no change and a signal sent that there'll be no real change.
No, I don't agree with that. We opened it up to international applications. I'm not actually sure how many people applied or how many people of a suitable qualification applied, but the process for the first time was opened up to people outside the Garda Síochána, outside the jurisdiction, and an assessment was made and recommendation made to Cabinet, and Noreen O'Sullivan was appointed. And as I said, the most important thing is she ensures that we have a police force, and that the state and the Minister ensures that we have a police force that people have confidence in, that they can go to, whether it be with whistleblowers or members of the public, that they know that the law of the land will be enforced equally to all people, to politicians, to judges, to celebrities, as it will be to the ordinary man or woman on the street, and that's the most important thing.
But nobody has been charged in a whole series of very serious scandals, not least absolutely corrupt decisions within the Gardaí. But I don't want to focus on that. Tell me the thing you're most proud of that the government achieved.
I think the fact that the government has presided over turnaround of the country's finances. Obviously, the outgoing government was unpopular, we know, and that's as a result of the crash. But they also were a government that people didn't have confidence in. And certainly over the last 5 years, if you look at international markets, investors, other countries who might be engaging in this country, who might be investing in this country, have regained confidence. And we can see that through bond yields, the cost of borrowing. I'm also proud of the fact that we have set the scene for jobs to be created by entrepreneurs, by people of this country, by people who have taken a risk, by SMEs. The IDA and the Enterprise Ireland have done sterling work in bringing new jobs into this country. Again, something that would have been imaginable 5 years ago, that there would be a level of investment that has taken place. And I said I'm proud that we've created a better environment over the last number of years to retain our young people, to keep people here, and we need to continue that work to put money back in people's pockets and to create jobs and to invest in public services.
Okay, if the numbers dictated it, what are the odds that you would go into government with Sinn Féin?
I don't think that's a realistic proposition. The Taoiseach has ruled that out. I think
is it zero?
Policies, zero, yes.
Okay, that's fair enough. What are the odds that you go into government with Fianna Fáil in a coalition?
Again, I've said this personally. I have no issue working with my colleagues here in Galway West, but I said we want this government to be re-elected. We want Fine Gael and Labour to be back into government, possibly with some independence. That's what we're fighting for.
We know that, but if the numbers dictated...
a stable government. We need a stable government. We can't have a situation, and we see what's happening in Portugal where they have instability and the effects that has, for example, on the cost of borrowing. So we want to get this government re-elected, and I don't envisage any other result. Okay.
It has been suggested, and including by Fianna Fáil candidate who I was talking to just a short while ago, that if Fine Gael and Labour were the largest group but didn't have a majority, they would do something akin to the Tallaght strategy and not oppose you on confidence votes. Would you be happy with that?
Again, that is an option. It all depends on the results on Friday or on Saturday when they're counted, and Sunday. There is a possibility if that happens, obviously, that we'd have an election again in a year's time or 18 months. So we could be in for a period akin to the early 80s, a period of political instability. I don't think that would be good for the country. I don't think it would be good. I think the people, first of all, wouldn't thank us for going to the country again in 6 months or a year and knocking on doors again and annoying them.
Would you prefer to have Fianna Fáil inside the tent?
Again, that's a question for Fianna Fáil, whether they'd want to be part of
but
government.
If you were to be, the option was to say, look, we'll do a coalition government with Fianna Fáil, rather than have the instability of them holding you over a barrel. You have to take all the hard decisions, and then they can kick you out whenever they want. Which would be preferable?
Well, obviously, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil would have to sit down and see if that is a possibility, and that would be up to both parties. And I understand from senior people in Fianna Fáil that they would not countenance that, and would have to be agreed by the membership of the party. So I certainly hope and believe that this government can and should be re-elected for another 4 or 5 years. I think that instability is not good, as I said. It's not good in terms of the future of the country. It's not good in terms of investment, is not good in terms of job creation. So I think when people go to the polls on Friday, they need to think long and hard about who can provide a stable government, and I believe Fine Gael, Labour and maybe a number of others can.
And finally, if you were to say in one single sentence to the people of Galway West why they should vote for you, Seán Kyne, number one, what would that be?
I want to continue to protect services, to invest in critical infrastructure and to provide honest and good government for the country and for the people of Galway West and South Mayo.
Seán Kyne, Fine Gael TD for Galway West, now running in Galway West with a bit of South Mayo added in. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Never miss a show. Follow at Here's How Podcast on Twitter and like Here's How on Facebook for updates on each show's contents.
On the line now, I have Councillor John Brassil of Kerry County Council. He's a Fianna Fáil councillor there since 1999, and he's now a Dáil candidate for the newly formed constituency of Kerry. John, why do you want to go to the Dáil?
Well, I've been working very hard as a local politician for the last 16 years. Continuing the work of my late father, who was on the council since 1974. Mm-hmm. I've, on a few occasions in the past, attempted to get on the ticket, but always never managed to get through the Fianna Fáil machine. But this time round, under the new one member, one vote system, the members put their trust in me at the convention. And it's, I believe that I have the necessary skills to represent Kerry at a national level, and I'm hoping the people of Kerry will put their trust in me on Friday and give me that opportunity.
Okay. One thing that I think stands out in politics with different political parties is that the parties can fall into one of two categories. One is that they might present a very unique political ideology, maybe like the PDs did, like the Green Party does, that they have a set of beliefs that nobody else shares. And the other is that while they mightn't have very strong ideology, they're better at management. They're good at running the country. Which do you think you and Fianna Fáil falls into?
Well, I'd like to see myself as a person who's in the new brand of Fianna Fáil. I think we got a pretty comprehensive drubbing at the 2011 election. Many people would argue that we got what we deserved. I think we were in power for too long and we lost our focus and we lost sight of the people who put us there to represent them. So I'm very much focused I'm a passionate Fianna Fáil member and believe that the party has done historically a lot more good than bad. But I'd like to think that into the future that we can once again re-establish ourselves as a party that represents the ordinary working person of Ireland, that represents people who want to go out and do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, and who can provide the type of services that a modern society deserves and demands. And you know, I'm well qualified. I've done I've 2 different university qualifications. I've been involved in my own business. I would hope that I can do that, and that Fianna Fáil can do that.
How would a Fianna Fáil government, or how would Fianna Fáil in government implement policies that could not possibly happen under Fine Gael?
I mean, being realistic, our ideologies are broadly similar, except that I think that Fianna Fáil are more centred towards the middle income and lower income earners, and I think that we try to strive towards a fairer society.
Okay, hold on a second there. Gerry Adams on the last leadership debate said that Fianna Fáil was the party that drove the bus over the cliff. Now you want the keys back to start driving again. Why would anybody trust you with that? Give a reason why it should not be Fine Gael.
Well, I mean, we were part of, we were in government when not only Ireland but the world economy collapsed, and you know, subsequent analysis has shown that while Fianna Fáil made mistakes in government, we weren't the sole reason for the Irish economy. There was many other factors. Gerry Adams is a member of Sinn Féin, whose party and parties like him.
Sure, he has a lot to answer for. But I'm more interested in Fianna Fáil. I'll tackle Sinn Féin as well. Hold on for 1 second, John, because my real question is, you're correct, there were international factors as well, but specifically Fianna Fáil type government, rezoning huge tracts of land. So for example, you were on Kerry County Council. There was enough land rezoned in Kerry alone to house every man, woman and child in the whole of Munster. That drove the property boom, and that's what made the bust in Ireland much worse than anywhere else. That's true, isn't it?
Well, if you check your facts, William, and it's a matter of public record, every zoning that was done in Kerry County Council that was inappropriate and not recommended by the planners, I voted against. And if you also check the record, you will find that a mixture of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and in particular independents, in particular the Healy Rays, were very much on the zone at all costs. I voted against every single one of those, and I'm very proud that I did.
You voted against every rezoning?
Every rezoning that was done that was not recommended by the planners of Kerry County Council, I voted against it. I'm sure you did. But would you accept the general point that Fianna Fáil, in general, on county councils, rezoned far too much? And there was way too much rezoning done and inappropriate zoning. And I would have to say that on that particular issue, my colleagues in Kerry County Council from the Sinn Féin party voted with me. So, you know, and there was 1 or 2 Fine Gael and 1 or 2 independents. There was about 6 of us who continually stated that what was being done was wrong and inappropriate, and we should be taking the planners' advice. And that was replicated all over the country. But, you know, I think
that's true. And it was typically, John, you would accept that it was typically more Fianna Fáil than anybody else who were responsible for the most inappropriate rezonings, which directly led to the bust.
Well, Fianna Fáil were the strongest party in local government, but I would, I'd have to challenge you to see of all the councillors were the councils as a whole, the body of council took decisions that were inappropriate, and all I can speak for is myself. I voted against it, and I took a very strong position, and I wasn't a very popular person for doing it at the time, but subsequent events have proven me to be right, and I wish everybody else had followed my lead at the time. But
I want to ask you a couple of questions about your policies in this election. One thing very prominently on the Fianna Fáil website is eliminating Irish water. Does that mean you get rid of water charges?
We'd suspend water charges until such a time as the network was put right, so that we could justify charging people for a service that you could that was in the correct standard that it should be for a modern day water structure.
But in the end of the day, people would pay for their water.
Yeah, at the end of the day they would, and I have no problem
with meters.
I've never had a problem with the principle of paying for water. It's a valuable resource. It costs a lot of money to produce it to the right standard, but we need to get our pipe network fixed. There's 48% of water unaccounted for in Kerry.
That's fair enough. That's pretty typical across the country, that half the water leaks before it gets to the houses. One other thing that you've promised is to eliminate USC, the universal charge for people on incomes up to 80,000. Wasn't one of the problems in the boom that the tax base got too narrow? Is it a good idea to narrow it again?
Well, the USC was brought in specifically as an emergency measure, and we'd argue, and correctly, that the emergency is over. So, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. If you give people enough spending power, that money will come back into the economy and will regenerate itself in other areas, such as, people will spend more on leisure activities, on tourism.
Now this has been called voodoo economics. You cut taxes and you get more money.
Absolutely not.
That sounds like Charlie McCreevy talk.
You have to accept that if there is more money circulating in the economy will do better.
The logical extension of that is to set taxes to zero.
But we're not proposing to abolish the property tax as other parties are, because the property tax provides a steady income from county councils to provide services. We're not proposing to abolish the USC for incomes over 80,000, because we believe that those earning most should pay more to make a fairer society. And what we're doing for the people under 80,000 is to try to give them a break, to try to allow them to have a bit better standard of living. And by doing that, we believe that you will generate, the multiplier effect, that for every euro you allow back into the economy, it turns itself around maybe sometimes up to 16 times. So that's fair policy.
One other policy that hasn't been much commented on, it says you would recreate town commissions, which were abolished under this government, for towns with a population greater than 7,500. Now there's about 60 towns in Ireland that have that size of a population. Does Ireland really need maybe 600 or more new paid politicians?
Well, I was part of the structure. I wasn't a member of the town council, but I was there when town council were there. Mm-hmm. And I would have to say, hand on heart, that the towns that had town council did benefit from having a democratic structure provide more services. I just feel that the abolition of town council has not worked, and I would agree with Fianna Fáil policy on that. Now, across the
how could you justify little hamlets in County Monaghan with 200 or 300 of population having nine elected paid councillors, and then other towns in Leinster with tens of thousands in a population not having that?
I wouldn't justify that. And what I was trying to say is that I did see across the town councils, some town councils extremely effective, extremely productive, and providing a fantastic service with the people of those towns, which to the betterment. And I'd look at Killarney and I'd look at Westport as prime examples of being really good standard local or town councils. So,
would you accept that there were a lot of rotten boroughs?
I would accept that there was ones that were not nearly as efficient as they should be. So if you're going to reintroduce a structure, you would have to do it in such a way that there was standard set that would be reached, and you will always get the good and the bad, but you should have standards that, every town council should strive to achieve, and the funding maybe that they get would be based on the results they produce. But the principle, you're never going to have a panacea of everything being right, but the principle of town councils, I believe, is better than what's there now, and we should be reintroducing them.
Will you exclude going into government with Sinn Féin?
Well, I mean, this is the big question is, what will the people vote on? No,
but you personally, or Fianna Fáil, would you have a problem with it?
I personally have, I don't have a problem if a party wants to do business with Fianna Fáil that allows us to implement the policies that will better this country. I think that we are obligated to look at all options if we're the strongest party after next Friday. And that's my personal position, and that's a position that I would be bringing forward to the parliamentary party if I'm successful. But again, there will be many members of that parliamentary party with a view. But I think if we're the strongest party, which is what we're going to the electorate looking to be on Friday, then and they give us a mandate, we're obligated to talk to everybody to form a government to implement those policies.
The polls are suggesting you won't be as large as Fine Gael. Will you be willing to join Fine Gael in a coalition?
The polls suggested in England that there wouldn't be an overall majority, and there was. So I'm very much sticking to the principle that our objective on Friday is to be the strongest party. In the event that Fianna Fáil are the strongest party, as I've said, we are obligated to talk to every option out there to form a government that will implement the policies that we've been given the mandate.
That's one hypothetical. A different hypothetical is that you will be second to Fine Gael, and in that event, would you be happy?
I would not be in favour of going into government not being the strongest party.
So if Fine Gael come out with more seats, but the only combination is the only plausible combination is a Fianna Fáil Fine Gael government, you'd say better to go for another election?
I'd say better to let Fine Gael find other parties and groupings to form a government with.
And if they were shy of a majority, would you have some sort of a tele strategy where you would not oppose them on confidence votes?
You're going into the speculation beyond speculation here. I think I've given you a very clear view. And
sure, that's fair enough. But just personally, would you think it would be a worthwhile thing to do to let them govern without threatening them?
Well, if you were asking me for a personal position, we can't turn around and say to the electorate, we don't like what you said, vote again. So whoever goes up there is obligated to form a government. I would prefer to be in a position of supporting a government based on implementing the policies that we can determine or that we can influence, from it being in a position of a weaker party in government. So, I'd rather be there saying, right, if you do what we want, then we'll support it. And call that a tele strategy, whatever you want to call it. That would be, I'd prefer that than to go in propping up a government as a weaker party.
Well, that's a clear answer. One last question for you, John. If you were to say to the people of Kerry in one sentence why they should vote for you in one sentence, what would it be?
I'm not afraid of making a difficult decision.
That's fair enough. Councillor John Brassil of Kerry County Council, also Fianna Fáil candidate for the new constituency of Kerry in the election. Thank you for talking to me. Best of luck in the election.
Okay, William, no problem.
Make your view heard. Dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. You can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
That's almost the end of the special election episode 32 of Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, published on the 25th of February 2016. That's the end of the election interviews. So if you can think of any other topic, or if you want to suggest someone to include, and that could be yourself, then let me know. If you like the podcast, please go on iTunes and give it a rating, or even write a nice review. Also, please like the show on Facebook. Please follow at Here's How Podcast on Twitter. And of course, subscribe to the show. You can use iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, or any other podcast app or software. You can do all of that or get in touch with the show right from www.here'show.ie. And if you're talking to anybody about the election, you could also mention how great this podcast is. The best of luck to anybody who is getting elected or not. The next show will be uploaded shortly. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.